Buzz made a weird sound there too.
Yeah, well, that's all getting cut.
Yeah. Woo. Ooh. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to episode 293 of Third Degree, the podcast. What an off-season this has been so far. Color me surprised, for sure. Hi, it's me, Peter. And look who returns for the new year and episode 293, which obviously will be one with lots of stuff in it. It is the good Dan Crooke, who's without a manager, by the way. Howdy, Dan.
Is this thing on? I haven't done this in a while.
Are you back only to celebrate the fact that Luton Town has fired their manager and is looking for a new one?
I'm very happy about that. Rob Edwards last year in charge definitely mirrored Nico Estevez in tactics, in denial of certain makeup of the roster, and in terms of wanting to start a new chapter.
Well, I hope whoever they hire fixes it soon, because Luton is in a bad spot right now, aren't they?
Yeah, it's all relative.
Hey, you've been there before. You know what this is like.
This
is old territory for you.
And
of course, well, I'm glad you're back, by the way, and Happy New Year to you and your family. Let's see. Here we go. Your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer himself, and a very, very busy man the last 72 hours. It is Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hey, Peter and Dan, I would just like to point out that Dan was coincidentally gone just in the time where Santa Claus was making peak appearances all over the world with that big old bushy beard.
My beard ain't got that much gray in it.
I mean, you can color it up for a little side work.
That's fair.
I like the Third Degree pod conspiracy theory that Dan Crooke is actually Santa Claus. I think that's pretty great.
It beats the one that anytime I have a conflict, I'm clearly drunk in a gutter somewhere.
Or,
at least this one is like keeps professionalism somewhat there.
Or you're doing a custom OnlyFans channel extravaganza for somebody in particular. Yes, I forgot.
Yeah, I'd schedule that better personally.
Very good. All right, so let me just, before we get started, I want to take an accounting of all the bullshit that's happening right now that we need to get into. One, Jesus Ferreira, no longer an FC Dallas player, traded to Seattle. Check. Two, Paul Arriola, trade is about to happen, being traded to Seattle. Half check. Three, the rumors of Alan Velasco being sold back to an Argentinian club, spin the wheel, insert club name here, is absolutely a check. Four, now Petar Musa has interest heating up from Premier League and other European clubs. Check. Five, Illarramendi apparently is or maybe is not coming back to Dallas. Who knows? Check. Dallas has re-signed or signed not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6 homegrowns to the senior roster. And 7, Bernard Kamungo was signed to a new contract. That is a lot, Buzz.
Yeah.
What in the world is going on?
Well, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, and the craziness just continues. And we talked, at the beginning of the winter about the idea that you needed to clear the deck to do some things, and they're doing that. So, as we always say, be ruthless over the winter, and so there's a whole lot of moving pieces right now. And really, 3 days from when players are reporting or starting camp even, we really have no idea what this team's going to look like. There's still a lot of work to be done. So only the first part of it is apparently partially done. So we got a lot to talk about.
So it's an interesting time because earlier today there was an exchange between me and the well-known fan, or I don't even, is he a curious member? I don't know. I don't know if he's a member of the Discord or not, but the Twitter account at Sad Fans was suggesting to me that people listen to this podcast and take what we say as fact. And he disagrees with some of that stuff. And a couple of things that he said, I think he's either misinterpreted or misunderstood or taken a bit out of context. The first is the idea that you, Buzz, suggested that the roster was locked and was never going to change for the next season.
No, well, that's not what we said. When Dallas hit the off season, I'm sure everyone will remember they actually had like 6 or 7 players over the limit because they had so many injuries. They had gone out and added all these pieces, and they started to cut and decline options and not bring guys back. And then they put out a list of 4 players they were still negotiating with that were out of contract. And if you added all those players in to the players that were left, you basically had a full roster of people, which was true. The point, of course, was that you're not going to bring back all 4 of those people. And also, we immediately started talking about and writing about how it was a really bad idea if you just did that. And they really needed to do all these other things. And then from there, there have started to be all these other things. So I don't think we ever were trying to say that the roster was locked at that point, just that it was full if you did nothing else, and the team was going to be really bad if you did nothing else. So that was really just a starting point and a setup point for what we felt was a winter where when you miss the playoffs, you're going to change a bunch of stuff. And that has proven to be true.
Yeah. And I think just to stick up for you a little bit on that point is that you even wrote an article talking about all the things that you recommended they should do to correct the roster. I think your original idea was, hey, look, you could see a world where this is the roster for 2025. And it will be difficult for them to get away from this unless they make some dramatic changes. And it appears that those dramatic changes, or at least many of them, have taken place.
Yeah. If you took them at face value of exactly the people that they currently had and the people that they were talking to, it would have been pretty much exactly the same roster. And that was the point. I proceeded to immediately write an article, and we talked about it on the pod a bunch about how they needed to move Jesus and Paul Arriola. I immediately started talking about how you clear a bunch of cap space, which involved redoing some contracts and other things. And then I wrote another article that talked about how they should go forward, like what the tactics should be, who they should shift around, what players they should get rid of, what players they should keep. So we've been talking all along about there needed to be a relatively large amount of changes when you're a team that missed the playoffs, and that we were expecting them with a new coach. We were expecting them to be making lots of changes. So
yeah,
it's been the plan, or not the plan. The thought process all along was that it's going to be a winter of change.
Yep. And I think the other one that he brought up is largely directed at me, because I think I'm the one that's has suggested this is a potential future, which is the idea that because of the renovations, the fact that the stadium will be at half capacity and therefore game day revenue and ticket sales will be greatly reduced for not one, but the next 3 seasons, that what we're seeing right now is a clearing out of the pantry of a bunch of old and stale food. But they're not shopping at Irwin or Central Market. They're actually restocking the pantry with groceries from Aldi's and playing the kids and on a money reduced roster is what we're looking at here for the next few years. Now I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. What I'm saying is that I can foresee this being what the roster looks like by the time the season starts in 2025, because of just what history tells us on how the Hunts manage bottom line roster construction. And that's just it.
Yeah, and to be fair, we don't really know one way or the other which one they're going to do, whether they're going to cut budget or they're not. They are not particularly vociferous about the direction that they're going. In fact, for the record, Zanata and Hunt both talked about getting back to what they feel is the club's DNA, which you saw today, which is the 6 homegrown signings, which is the develop of the youth. To be fair, we're also seeing them go to the 2 DP and 4 U22 initiative model, which brings in a bunch of GAM, but means you'll have 1 less DP next year. That doesn't mean, of course, that they're completely in on this play the kids cheap model, but as you say, history does show that that's kind of the direction they want to sort of go. the signings of guys like Velasco and Petar Musa are outside the normal. They both have been nice, and we would like them to continue to do more things like that, but they're not the normal. The normal is much less, and their moves on their surface show that they are doing that and kind of heading that direction. But at the same time, they're also doing the moves that allow them to clear boatloads of salary mechanics in order to bring in more guys like Allen and Musa. The thing is, since they flat out said 2 DPs and 4 U22 initiatives, there's not going to be another DP other than Allen or Musa unless they sell one of those 2 guys. Those are your 2 DPs. So
Right.
you can't look at this club right now and say, oh, there's some big moves coming. Well, sort of. You're not going to get a DP move because they've already got 2, unless they sell one. You might get Reto Ziegler, Illarramendi type, Ibiaga, those TAM moves, those guys that are, Paul Arriola style 1.7 million and down that can be bought down because they have a boatload of GAM. Now, do you call those big moves or do you call those like solid, strong move? There's a difference there in what you might call that. But again, they haven't officially cleared Paul's money yet, but they're going to. So everything's relative. We are talking about FC Dallas,
Yeah.
but they're showing their cards a little bit here, pending a sale of Velasco or Musa, which obviously will radically change things. And then you're looking at a massive, complete rebuild, and then all bets are off about would they get, what kind of DPs would they go get, and that kind of thing. That's a totally different level of conversation when that happens.
Yeah. Well, I think so far, at least at the time that we're doing this, they have gotten rid of 2 players that were making. One making 1.7 million, one making 2.2 million, and the 2 of the replacements make well less than DP dollars in Abubakar and Anderson Julio. And then the new 30-something-year-old midfielder whose name now escapes me off the top of my head. I assume he's not making more than $600,000 or $700,000. So it's not like
Ramiro.
Ramiro. Thank you. It's not like they're replacing salary for salary here, and in fact, they've made some significant savings already to date.
Mm-hmm.
To be totally fair, the transfer window doesn't open for a bit, or doesn't close for a while. Lots of things could still happen. I just tend to work off of what I know in terms of how the Hunts operate this club. That's where I'm coming from.
Well, we started the winter talking about them being over the cap, somewhere maybe like in my calculation, it was maybe somewhere between 1 to 2 million, and they cleaned that up. Then we started talking about making a couple big moves in Jesus and Paul in order to give yourself some capital to do some radical things with your roster. They're doing that. So, they're following the steps that we laid out they needed to do in order to then now try and rebuild them and get better. And so I think we can have an expectation that there will be some pieces coming in. They're not going to be DPs. Zanata has flat out said they're not done at center back. Illarramendi just today said he wants to come back to FC Dallas. There are going to be more pieces, but huge pieces they won't be because they don't have the DP slots.
Well, I appreciate @sad FC Dallas fans for being a good fan and an excellent Twitter account in terms of the fan base. I'll just say I can't get away from the idea that Clark Hunt is looking at reduced revenue for 3 entire seasons and think that he's about to go spend more money or the same amount of money he's been spending over the last few seasons. Nobody would be happier to find out that I was wrong than me. So there you go. Dan, we hadn't heard from you yet. Do you got any kind of overarching observations about all of this noise and movement that's been taking place since we last talked to you?
Oh, it's all just very exciting, isn't it? We're used to... It feels like every offseason it's, they haven't signed anyone yet. They don't normally until the middle of camp. We don't really know what's going to happen. Kit talk's like the only thing to worry about. And, we've got training camp officially starts on Monday. The players report on Saturday. We don't know who the assistant coaches are other than Michel. We don't know the plan. 6 homegrowns. Are most of them likely to be with North Texas SC or loaned out? Are they going to play the kids? What's going to happen with Arriola? What's going to happen with Illarramendi? It's just, it's exciting. I'm liking it. It's fun. It's not just a usual. Great, cool, yeah. Let's wait until the season starts.
Well, let's run through all of the different talking points, and I guess obviously the one to start with would be the fact that what at one time was the face of the club, the crown jewel of the academy, the largest homegrown contract signing in league history, all sorts of statistically important records and factoids and things that make him very important to this club. The son of a club legend who came through the academy to become a club hero himself. Jesus Ferreira is no longer an FC Dallas player and has been traded to Seattle for a deal that I am shocked to say, Buzz, if you really get into the weeds, is actually a worse deal than we even thought it was last week.
Yeah, they have on paper, they have added a little bit to the money. Like it now is up to $2.3 million in GAM, but they traded a little bit of security or guarantee in that, in the sense that 800,000 of it is based on Jesus' performance. And with his injuries he's had lately and his struggles he's had lately, that's not a guarantee that you're going to meet those metrics. We don't even know what they are, of course. So there's some looseness in that. The international spot that came in return is worth about 250,000. Leo Chu, let's just arbitrarily say maybe he might be worth about, if you had to trade for him straight up, maybe you might have to pay like 500K GAM to get him.
Well, it's worth with him, keeping in mind Seattle paid $3.5 million for him.
Yeah, but I think like if you tried to trade for him, I don't think you would get it would cost you that now, because his contract is up at the end of the year. So I think maybe you would pay like 500K GAM if you wanted to get him. I think part of the value that Dallas sees in him is the idea that they could turn around and flip him, because he wants to leave the league. I understand. I don't know much about him, to be fair. So I don't think the value of that really adds up to the $3 million in GAM. And I did do some more digging, and I found out that the Las Palmas sale of Jesus that we talked about happened last summer. That price was $3 million. So
Wow.
way off the 12 million that they would have gotten from Russia. So that $3 million kind of was setting the bar, and that's the $3 million threshold for what you can get if you had sold him. And that deal fell apart because Las Palmas failed to sell a player that they were trying to get out in order to get money in. So that's why that deal fell apart. And so you can talk about Jesus having been wanting to leave here since way back before the Russia deal. You can go all the way back to the summer before, really. So the kid has been wanting a fresh start. That happens all the time. He's been with the club since he was 8 or 9 years old or whatever it was. I get that. He said something today, or maybe it wasn't today, about wanting to win trophies. He obviously had an itch and a desire to go. And to be honest, it doesn't even matter that he wanted to or not. When Dallas misses the playoffs and is a bad team, you have to look at your team and say, how can we get better? And you don't trade Jesus because he's a bad player, because he's far from that. You trade him because in a league that has restrictions on cap and restrictions on roster, when you have the luxury of a player playing his same position, Logan Farrington, who is producing at a similar level, that gives you the luxury to not use a DP in that position. Even though Logan maybe is, by some people's consideration, more of a 9, I don't think so. I think he's better as a winger. So that gives you the luxury to move another piece. Like, for example, if you had a 9 that came in and was banging in 15, 20 goals and he only costs like 100K, well, then you would sell Musa for anything you could get, just because that's the nature of this league. And that's what we talked about all the time. You have to be ruthless. So this deal makes sense for both parties in the sense of moving on. And when it comes down to Jesus' value in the open market, that $2 million contract is a killer, because the only teams that can really afford that are teams in the top 5 leagues, and really then only teams in like the top 25% of any of those given leagues. If you're talking like a mid-tier league outside the big 5, or even a mid-tier team in any of those big 5 leagues, they can't afford $2 million. Like the Las Palmas thing, that would have broken their club transfer record, $3 million for Jesus. So, this in the end is about the only really mechanism Dallas had in order to move a player that they need to move to try and do some things. So in the end, it works out for all parties. I remain like you, Peter. I think disappointed in the haul. I don't know what.
Well, wait, but wasn't the real disappointment, the surprising disappointment out of the final numbers is that if Jesus doesn't play a single minute for Seattle, all Seattle has to give Dallas is $1.5 million in GAM. Like that's the base of it. Everything else on top of it, outside the international spot and Leo Chu, is works under the premise that Jesus hits some sort of preset performance numbers.
Even the sell on.
Yeah. And who knows what those are? I mean, it could be he dribbles the ball 3 times with only his left foot for 2 minutes or something. I don't know. It could be that he has to hit 15 goals.
Right. That's the criticism we've been talking about for a couple of years now, though, right? Is the risk reward decisions that Dallas has made with their roster. We talked about that a whole bunch over the last 2 years, and they've done it sort of here again. They're making a bet that Jesus is going to be better than he has been the last year and a half, 2 years. I think that's probably a safe bet, so I get the idea that you're gambling that he's going to come good, probably fairly safe, but again, it's not. There's a risk factor there. But at the end of the day, they really had to do this. I'm just, as I say, I'm slightly disappointed in the return, particularly because I don't think Leo Chu helps you at all. I think when you've got Bernie and you've got Farrington, like we just talked about, when you got Farrington, you don't need a winger. And they also went out and got Anderson Julio. So what does Leo Chu get you? I mean, he might be like, if Velasco's here, he's like 5th or 6th at wing.
I think, you mentioned the idea of flipping him.
Yeah.
Seattle turned down a bid from Fluminense last year for $4 million for him. They don't need the money. They need the players that are going to contribute for the Club World Cup and everything else, which Jesus is, Paul Arriola could be. FC Dallas is looking for the money. So if you give Andre, a guy who is, if he's good at one thing, it's getting money for players and particularly Brazilian players. You give him a $4 million asset and no incentive to say, no, actually, we want more than that, then that weighs that transfer back and ultimately outweighs kind of what Las Palmas offered for Jesus.
Yeah, and that's more betting on your ability to perform. Like, right, you're betting on Jesus's ability to perform, and you're betting on Zanata's ability to perform at the thing that theoretically is his best asset. So if you can flip Chu for a larger bit of money, then you really have won the gamble and you have won the bet. And maybe in a year from now, we look back on this deal and think, boy, what a crushingly amazing deal. It's just risky.
Yeah, we were talking about this last week, Dan, that we can look at this trade from all different kinds of angles. And the only thing that I feel really solid in saying is that we will have no idea as to who won or how well this thing played out until the end, at the earliest, the end of the 2025 season. Based on how Jesus performs for Seattle. I just don't know how that's going to play out. And how we got to this point is also a large part of this story. Like how it ended is really, I think we can all agree that none of us ever imagined that Jesus Ferreira's end as an FC Dallas player would transpire anything like this, especially the fact, because I still don't think we've dug in enough to the concept that Dallas needed to get a dude off their roster so badly, his attitude, his vibe, and his money, that they turn around and sold him to a direct in-conference nemesis that has kicked him out of the playoffs, 3 times in a row? Like, I still can't cotton in my head how we got to this point, and it's really strange.
I think it's going to be one of those transfers that 5 years later you kind of look at and you make the real assessment. Like a bigger version of, trading a player for a draft pick. Well, what became of that draft pick? Did it get used for trading up? Did it get exchanged for an international roster spot, TAM money? Does it turn into Ryan Hollingshead in the second round of the 2013 draft? Something along those lines. The true value is going to take a little while. Same with Chris Richards. The $1.5 million was kind of crappy. Then he gets sold to Crystal Palace, and suddenly there's a few million more, and you're like, okay, well, now they've kind of got a decent haul off it. So, he needed a new fit. FC Dallas needed a new fit. He is a luxury. It's kind of like what Oscar Pereira used to say about, you don't want to move a player around to kill two positions, because he's not really a 9, he's not really a winger, he's not really a 10. He likes to kind of drop back into the 6 almost, which isn't going to work for Quill's style in any way, shape, or form. He's had his injury worries. It's just a really good time to kind of move on, and just it's a good solid part of the rebuild. It really helps with the cap deficit that they did have. And now I know, like Armand keeps talking about absolutely stacking GAM and what they could potentially do with that.
I am dying to know, and I'm certainly going to be watching a lot of Seattle games next year, because how Jesus performs and how he fits in with that group, and his tactical, his positional tweenerness, as I think we like to call it.
Yep.
How that all fits in Smetzer's system, and how he gels with those guys, where he's not the big fish in the pond anymore. He's not the leader and not the one, like, do we start seeing Jesus just behave himself and not fall back into the midfield because he feels like he has to do everything because he's on a better team? And I don't know. I think that's really going to be interesting to watch next season, Buzz.
Well, he doubled down on being a 9, so we know where he wants to play. We'll see if he does. Or
I think that's Jordan Morris's position all day long up there.
Yeah. Well, you never know. You can move guys around, play 2-striker system. Who knows what they're going to do? I'm not anywhere near knowledgeable enough about Seattle and their setup to think about what they're going to do with Jesus. But it's going to be fascinating from afar to watch and see how it goes for him. I'll always have a cheering interest in the kid because he came through the system here. He's David's son, so.
Yeah, I said to you guys earlier, I never thought I'd ever see a day where I really missed the farewell video.
Yeah, right. Well, I still have hopes, of course, that Jesus will make his way to Europe and get the opportunity he wants. So good luck to him, for sure.
I just hope he doesn't score a winner in the 97th minute of an MLS playoff game against Dallas.
Yeah, and hopefully won't celebrate against his old team.
Saying that, I do think somebody out there, I don't care who it is, needs to set the over and under of the amount of minutes played it will be before Jesus scores his first goal against Dallas. So we can set the over and under betting line, and people can pick the over or the under.
I have no idea how many minutes it'll be, but I would imagine that Jesus is the kind of guy who will score in the first game he plays against Dallas.
So you're going to set that at like 45 minutes and take the over and under?
No, it'll be in the second half, but yeah. That's how it goes for Dallas, and that's how it goes for Jesus.
It would be an outstanding addition to the list, would it
not?
Well,
yeah, for sure. Probably to eliminate Dallas from the playoffs, I would imagine. That's the kind of thing that happens.
Just stick it in and twist it, Buzz.
I know. You've been around long enough, this team,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny to me because in the midst of all this, the Paul Arriola trade, I think we've been told by multiple people, and Buzz, I know you got mixed up in this, that deal has been agreed to, that just has not been officially announced.
Yeah, it almost died. Like my source I had that was saying it was dead was acting on like 2 to 3 day old info. When they had actually heard that it was completely dead. Basically, what happened in the late stages of it was that there was a problem from the FC Dallas side about how they were going to do the buy down part. So if everyone's not clear, Paul's $1.7 million, he still is going to get his money. So like for the Seattle part, they can't have that much of a cap hit. So they're going to get him on a much cheaper number, and Dallas is going to buy down a section of his salary. Now, originally we had heard that they would use the buyout. So what I was told was that something happened, and whatever method they were trying to use was not going to work. So the deal was basically dead. Like 3 days ago, basically, maybe even last weekend, maybe the deal was dead. And they managed to keep working, and they resurrected it and apparently figured out how to do it. And my understanding from talking to a couple of different people and reported by people like Bogert and other people quite clearly is that that trade's now gone to the league office, and it just has to clear the league hurdle, and it'll be announced. So like, could that be tomorrow? Or on Friday, the day you're listening to this, perhaps most people, could it be this weekend? Basically the trade is imminent. It'll happen any minute.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of people that are going to be sad to see Paul go.
I will be, yeah.
Yeah, because he's obviously a great locker room leader and everything. But man, that was another critical piece of the roster. To be able to correct it and fix it, you had to get him off the books.
Yeah, this comes back to the idea again. If when Nico Estevez put this roster together with Zanata's assistants, the committee, they were betting on guys like Leggett and Arriola and Jesus Ferreira. And 3 seasons later, the team has gotten worse each season. And when you miss the playoffs, you then have to evaluate everything you're doing. And one of the things that you have to evaluate is what you're paying people to what they're giving you. And while Paul is an amazing captain, amazing leader, amazing guy, he's not going to be in the current setup a right-wing starter, which is what his pay scale is in line with. You certainly don't expect to have wingbacks of $1.7 million price. So there was a poor fit there. And because of the fact he was effectively a fourth DP, they were having to pay just boatloads of money to buy him down, which was costing them large chunks of their available GAM that they had at the time. So it was really important. And I wrote back in the day that how important it was. And I've even come to believe it was even more important than the Jesus deal in terms of clearing pure value, because not only do you clear the roughly $1 million that you're having to buy down, you're now clearing a salary slot for a TAM GAM DP, whatever it's going to be, that $744,000 for next year. So that's a big piece that you've now opened up to give yourself the ability to do things. And Dallas loves these guys that are on just a little bit money above that TAM thresholds, from everything from Reto Ziegler, who was on like a 900, down to like Ibiaga this time, which probably will be about like 10K over that number. Your value may vary on how much mileage you get out of their signings, but they love that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Dan, Jesus and Paul in Seattle, what do you think, if you're a Seattle fan, what level of excitement should you have about either or of those guys?
I don't really know where either of them actually fit in. Like you mentioned, Jordan Morris is the 9 there. He's got a DP deal now. The priority is surely to play him. You've got De La Vega on the right, which, that would be Jesus' other spot, or potentially Paul Arriola's other spot. I don't know enough about that team overall, but it seems like, I don't know. It seems like Jesus could be like Raul Ruiz, kind of just coming off the bench late in games, and
that's going to drive him nuts, isn't it?
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe there is a concession to it. Maybe there is maybe Schmetz has got a new plan, and it involves kind of all of the pieces. But obviously over time they've had to move Christian Roldan further back to kind of accommodate him in the team with the attacking players they do have, much like we saw with Paul Arriola last year in Dallas. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure where either of them fit in.
Well, maybe Spencer will be the person that finally plays Jesus in the best position possible as an off striker, Buzz, and they'll make a tactical and formation change, and we'll finally see the best out of Jesus. Because
the weird part about that is that I don't think Jesus thinks that's his best position, because whenever you play him there, which I think is where he belongs, he then runs all over the field. So he only stays up front if you play him as a 9. It's going to be weird.
I was going to say, yeah, he would be like Albert Rusnak's direct replacement in that case.
They just re-signed him, didn't they not? Rusnak?
Oh, didn't they? Did they?
I think they did today.
Yeah, I always thought that Jesus' roaming about and coming way back was because he just got tired of not getting the ball enough, and it just felt like he had to do everything. It's like the Blas Perez effect. Remember when Blas used to be the 9 and you'd see him back playing right back? It's because you just felt like Blas thought he was the best player on the team and needed to do that to get the team to do anything, and that was
Blas
always
would also get forward.
That's true. Yeah. I'm really fascinated to see. Paul, to me, for Seattle, is just a bench player and a guy that they can call on for different tournaments and come in late in the game and be a great locker room guy in what I think is already a really solid locker room. Jesus is the one that man, I'm just dying. I mean, I could totally see a world where Jesus goes to Seattle, and because he's not the man, suddenly blossoms into this different player than we've ever seen in Dallas. You know what I mean? Because he's on a better team and he's not the one being counted on and he's not carrying it on his shoulders. But I
doesn't
also
have that weight, doesn't have his dad's weight, has more freedom.
Yeah, but I could also see him going to Seattle and running around on that god-awful NFL turf day in and day out and getting hurt a lot and not being available a lot.
Man, I hope not, for his sake. I mean, for Dallas' sake too, because if that happens, if he goes up there, he's hurt all the time, you're probably not going to hit those metrics. You're not going to get all that money.
But see, this is what I was saying last week, Buzz, is the real value of this deal for Dallas, no matter what the amount is. I know you wanted $3 million, Buzz. I know you felt like there was a line in the sand that he's not worth trading, but at some point, is not getting that vibe out of the locker room and that $2.2 million off your books worth it alone unto itself?
The vibe's not that killer. I think I know what you mean, the countenance, but I think it's more about the roster. That's the major important. That's why they had to do this. I just always felt like if the price isn't there, if Seattle's not going to come up to value, which they have with that risk factor, that I think you had to be willing to wait, and like get it in the next window. You have to be able to. If you have a player that is difficult, you have to, at this level, be able to coach a difficult player. You can't panic sell a guy just because he's difficult. And Dallas all the time talks about how they want to be Seattle, the team that makes the mid-season move to vault them up. So I just wanted to feel like this whole time with this deal, like, yes, you need to do it, but don't be afraid to wait 6 more months when there might be more money and more in the world and more movement in the world. But at the same time, like, I totally get why they feel like they need to do it now. I get why Jesus thinks he needs to do it now. And if you can live with the risk of A, him meeting the metrics, and B, can you get for Leo Chu what people think you can? If you can hit those things, then this deal may look fabulous. But I hate seeing panic moves or poorly thought out moves, and I'm just not 100% confident that this is the best return, but I think it's what we're going to have to live with. So I'll get over it. I mean, especially if the metrics all come out and they manage to turn Chu into something, then I'll be fantastically happy. So
yeah, my observation is I think this was the only deal they had on the table available.
Oh, absolutely.
And and getting him off the books and out of the room was priority number one, and check that box.
Absolutely.
Which, and here's the reality, because in the last 24 hours, one of the other items that we've talked off and on about, mostly as a joke or dismissed because we just thought it was a lot of, agent noise and everything to get him a new deal, which he got and just signed, it seems like a couple of weeks ago. Alan Velasco staying in Argentina, because if I'm correct, he has not returned to Dallas as of the time of this recording for his Saturday report in. And may end up staying there and playing for Boca or River or some team down there. And the number that we've heard is what, $10 million in a transfer fee?
Well, it's varying. The thing about media in Argentina is that the level of attention there is like the NFL here. So you've got multiple people out there reporting conflicting things. And so they have these are all people with massive presences and massive audiences that are making these reports. And so which ones you buy, it's up to you, because I'm not getting anything on this domestically. But apparently we're seeing reports of Boca and Estudiantes both offering $10 million. The FC Dallas wanted 12, but was also willing to talk if you're willing to do a sell-on percentage. And so today we saw that Allen apparently got in a car accident with his agent, but is fine. B, that Dallas said yes to 10 million to Boca, but was then negotiating sell-on percentage. We also saw one that said Allen is refusing to fly back to the United States because he wants this deal. And then we also saw one that said Dallas has not agreed to the $10 million price, and that there is no sell on at all. So, whether any of these are true is hard to say. We have seen Boga report that the Boca did make a $10 million bid. So your money and mileage may vary on whether this is actually happening or not. Certainly, there's enough smoke and heat here that there's definitely some fire to this transfer. Is Allen actually getting on a plane, or is he actually refusing to get on a plane? I have no idea. We'll see Monday or Tuesday when we actually get to training. We'll find out whether he's here or not. And maybe by then we'll have seen a deal go through. There definitely is enough here that you can't assume that Alan Velasco will be back this year.
Yeah. So pause that for a second, because then, not like we needed any more drama going on, was at least some reporting that Petar Musa had interest from Nottingham Forest and Leicester. I think we talked about this. Did we talk about this last week?
We did. And we have not seen a lot of news on this since then.
All right. So what I want to, the reality that we all need to discuss now is that the 2025 roster may be one that we know isn't going to have Jesus. We know it's not going to have Paul, but now it may not even have Alan Velasco and Petar Musa on it.
Yeah, it seems like the 18 million pounds asking price for Musa is what's kind of like shying teams off a little bit. But keep in mind, those European windows, specifically the English window, Dan, I'm right, runs till the end of January. So there's a lot of time for these teams to, and at least one of them needs to get money in before they can do that kind of deal. So, I'm not going to hold my breath that deal's not happening either. But again, we have not, unlike the Alan Velasco thing, where there's now a report every 20 minutes, there's been nothing on Musa since then. But I imagine his feelings might be very different depending on whether Alan is here or not. If Petar Musa is going to look around and see there's nobody else here but me, what am I doing? Or is the technical director and the coach in there talking to him saying, hey, here's the 5 more guys we're bringing in. You're going to be fine. These are the things we don't know and we're not privy to. So it's going to be hard to say. So stay tuned on this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a long way from the concept of, oh my gosh, this roster looks really locked in for 2025 unless they make some big moves to, we've suddenly flushed out all 3 of our DPs and sold off several other guys. I mean, it would be a completely different.
They could have 0 DPs in a week.
It would be nuts.
Oh, my goodness. Hey, by the way, I just bought the Newcastle retro jersey while we were talking about that. So that's cool.
Oh, nice. Nice for you. So, Dan, again, I'm going to let Buzz and I take a sip of water and breathe. You got any other additional thoughts about all this you want to throw in?
Nah, I'm just excited, man. I don't know. Silly season. It's great.
You just like all the noise.
Yeah.
You don't care how it falls out?
I mean, I care how it falls, but we can go back and forth about the potentials of Jesus and the potentials of Paul and how they perform in a different system, how they perform in Dallas and their relative values to their salaries and everything else. But ultimately, this is year 1 of a rebuild with a new coach, new just about everything. The only real things that were locked in going into the offseason were Farrington, Paz, and potentially Musa, unless, someone can hit a silly number, in which case you're like, yes, please.
Well, I guess that is part of the question, which is, would we be upset with or blame the Hunts for selling Velasco for $10 million or $11 million and Musa for 18 or 20 or whatever that number is?
Well, it would always depend on if there's a sell on or not. I don't think you'd get a sell on at 18 million for Musa, but the thing about FC Dallas in particular, MLS in general, and the position that those organizations hold, like in the world strata, in order to try and build at this level, you have to be what I would effectively call a commodities trader. You need to buy low and sell high. That's the way this business works. That's the way soccer works. So if Alan Velasco, you flipped for 10 million, and you got him you spent 8 to get him, and you flip him for 10, coming off of an ACL injury. 10, 12, I'm in. 10, okay, give me sell on. If you give me a sell on percentage at 10, fantastic. 12, fantastic. I am not 100% sold on Alan Velasco being the answer. I think there are questions about whether he would be a David Ferreira level MVP type player if he comes inside or not. He's not as impactful on the score sheet as I would like him to be. So I would be happy with that price. I think it's a fair value for that kid. and 18 million for Musa, a year later, because that's 22 million domestic MLS money, dollars. That's what they call those. 22 million US dollars, 18 million pounds. That's doubling your money in 1 year for a guy. It's a business. You can't shake that off. That's fair. That's way more than fair. That's a huge return. We saw the way the club completely changed when they pocketed 20 million on Pappy. Those two players would absolutely 100% more than make up for any revenue downfalls you would have by a long shot from the stadium being, closed down partially. So I 100% get it. You would get each of those guys could get you up to $3 million in GAM. And when you use it on selling a player, you can appropriate it over the years. You don't have to use it this year when you've already stockpiled. So you could add it on the next 2 years. You could have a really nice chunk of money moving forward to do some things for your team.
Yeah. And I guess the big question is that if we all agree that selling those two guys for those amount of money is totally understandable and the right thing to do, the question then becomes, what's the level of confidence that the Hunts will go out and spend that money to replace those players?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, that's the difference between what we're talking about with Jesus and the Logan Farrington ready-made replacement. Now, if you think Farrington's better as a 9, which a lot of people do, then you think, great, I've got a ready-made replacement for Petar Musa. And maybe I don't have to go spend it a 9. Again, I think Logan's better as a winger, so I would like to see them go out and do something else as a 9. But remember, Petar Musa costs, what was it, Dan? 13 million. So if you pocket 22 million for him, take that same 13 million and go get another player of similar caliber, and you pocketed $10 million. So you'll have all your DP spots will be open. You'll have just absolutely crushing amounts of TAM and GAM to facilitate signing of another player. Would it happen in the next 2 weeks? Probably not. But, we saw last summer when they tried to get a center back and they fumbled that one. So your mileage will vary on whether you think they can do it or not. But, new coach, listen, it would just go from a middle road rebuild to a complete rebuild. I mean, I don't know how big a difference we were talking about.
All right. And this will probably be a key element into trying to figure out, what their plan is in terms of adding new players. Can you explain to me, and for anybody else that doesn't know, what the rule is about? Armand last week was talking about this giant Richie Rich pile of GAM and TAM that they were collecting. Isn't there? Doesn't that have a date stamp on it? Like you have to, if you don't spend that TAM or GAM by a certain date, you lose it.
It depends. Some of it yes, and some of it no. You get it from lots of different places, and a lot of it has a tag of when it's for. You get it for being a team that missed the playoffs. You get it when there's an expansion team. Everybody gets a little bit. When you have a player taken in an expansion draft, you get a little bit more. When those are all like to the Jesus trade, the money is clearly identified, like 1 million this year, 500,000 next year. Like it's clearly marked what year it's for. When you sell a player for over $3 million, you can take up to $3 million of that money and apply it when you want. So you could say, let's say if you sold Allen for 12 or 10 or whatever, you then have $3 million to play with. Well, they've got so much this year, they probably would not take that 3 and apply it this year. They probably would, amortize it out over the next couple of years, like maybe $1 million a year for the next 3 years they would give themselves. So some of it expires in specific windows and some of it does not. This is part of the stupidly opaque MLS rules that make this all incredibly complicated, even for people who do this for a living to understand. People mess this stuff up and they work for the clubs, right? I mean, mistakes happen and people leave money on the table. So like, when you have a bunch like Dallas does right now, that's all in one season, or a lot of it's in one season, they probably will want to try and package it and move it for something, like when they spent $2 million of it to get Paul, for example, like Seattle's doing to get Jesus. You try and do some different things with it. That's why even when these deals happen, Dallas won't be done. Like other things will come from it. And that's what our mom was talking about. The way it doesn't expire is you go get a player, and then that asset then is a player that lasts for years. So it's an incredibly awful system, and it's really hard to explain how it all functions and what has value and what doesn't have value. Like why is a international spot, almost always going for 250,000 GAM. Sometimes it's just what the market has set. So it's stupid.
All right.
Sorry.
So no, there's no reason to apologize. It is complicated and gives everybody tired head.
Yeah.
It's needlessly complicated.
Oh my God.
But I guess the question is, with all of this happening,
yeah,
and let's just work under the assumption that Velasco is staying and Musa is staying, that those sales aren't happening and those guys are here to play. What do we ultimately think Dan Hunt and Andre Zanata and whatever the mystery TD guy's name is that we've never seen in public? I'm kidding. What is the plan? Because how much of the news that they signed Bernie Kamungo to, I was shocked they signed him for as long as they did, because I still have no idea what they've got in that kid.
Yeah.
And that they signed 6 homegrowns. I mean, there are MLS clubs that haven't signed 6 homegrowns in their entire history. Dallas signed 6 homegrowns today.
Yeah.
What does that mean in terms of what the plan is for 2025, if anything?
Well, the 6 homegrowns mean nothing, really, other than maybe Diego Garcia, because most of them are...
and how is he a homegrown?
That's another mystery. My guess is that Diego Garcia is a homegrown because even though he signed a professional deal with North Texas first, he retroactively then went and played in the academy after that, and somehow that qualifies, I guess. I mean, it's MLS.
Wink,
Who
wink.
knows? Don't argue with it. Just accept the fact that that's awesome that they got him as a homegrown.
Okay.
So Diego Garcia will be in the mix for next year, but that's really it. OL Collodi is the third keeper. That's fair too. Third keeper, how much is that third keeper going to play? Well, last year it was 0. So who knows? And the other part of the equation is that you can now have as many homegrowns as you want. Hence Dallas signing 6 in one day, and they don't have any salary cap hit. So again, you can sign as many as you can afford. Like, you literally could go sign 30 academy homegrowns tomorrow. You could go find your top 60 guys in the academy tomorrow and sign all 60 of them if you wanted. They're not all going to be active. You can only activate a certain number of them at a time, based on that 30-man roster. But who cares if you're talking about teenagers, right? They're all going to play for North Texas or whatever. So the bigger meaning of the homegrown signings is the doubling down and the returning to the club DNA that Zanata and Hunt talked about. This is the action that follows up that instruction, developing players, trying to get them into the first team, trying to sell them. This is all what they did. Kamungo is the difference between, we don't know the number yet, but more than likely is the difference between a bare minimum senior roster player on the league minimum and more like a probably something in the neighborhood of like what an Ima Tuamasi made, or Nkosi when he first got his first contract extension. That kind of like, you're an important player but not a starter value. Get him off the league minimum.
He got
get him signed up for a couple years. Probably double or triple the money, but relatively speaking, the money probably, we're still guessing at this point, is going to be minuscule and essentially nothing. Like, not really any kind of thing to worry about at all.
Are you pleased that they signed Bernie, or surprised they signed him to that long of a deal?
Well, remember that Quill's the one who found him. So I would expect Bernie to go do really well under Quill. So, there's a history there and an interest and a love, and if you will, he's the guy that brought him into North Texas and developed him.
So we're convinced that that Kamungo's big fall off last year was all tied to formations and tactics and being asked to do something he wasn't comfortable with.
Because the minute they switched formations late in the season and Luxon played him at a actually high winger's position, you're like, oh, there's Bernie, right? It wasn't a couple of games, but it was pretty clear.
You're saying he's not a wing back?
It's not a wing back, not a false 10 underneath, not a high striker,
Well, it's also hard. He's a guy that didn't go for an academy. He didn't have like that day-to-day professional coaching until he got with Quill. So for him to be 2-3 years into that position, to then go, right, okay, you're going to play here. Next week, you're going to play there. The week after, you're going to play there. We used to talk about Ryan Hollinshead when he got switched from left back to right back, and he'd spend half the game just instinctively going to the wrong side. And that was a guy who was a near 10-year professional at that point. Like,
Yep.
yeah, Bernie was really thrown in the deep end on that one.
So 6 new homegrowns, Bernie Kamungo. I guess the other thing is that the Illarramendi, I guess he's a free agent, but Dallas owns his rights. There was word that Austin and Nico were talking to him, but apparently that didn't come true. So now we're leaning towards the idea that Illarramendi may be back.
Yeah, there was a quote. I think it was a TV interview. The video's out there where he says that he had a great season and that he's really hoping that he's going to come back to FC Dallas and that he hasn't signed a deal yet. But I would imagine that Illarramendi being back is probably waiting on some of these other moves to happen, to clearing roster spots and clearing the money to bring him back, because he's not on that Bernie contract. He's on more of a, it won't be I don't think it'll be a TAM level deal, but it'll be, 400 or 500 like he was on last year. I would think, that is not unreasonable to have him expect to get the same money. So that one may just be a question of, we have to actually have the Paul trade happen in order to have the money to be able to, put you on the roster and buy you down or whatever. Cause that's a weird thing. People don't, one of the weird things you can do with TAM and GAM is you can buy down players just in general. They don't have to be TAM players or DPs. You can just buy down anybody, so I'm sure that pending some weird other things happening, I would imagine that Illarramendi would be coming back. Otherwise, I don't know why he'd be talking about it. He would be saying, no, I'm moving on or whatever. So, especially because he is a worldwide free agent.
I would love to know how far the Austin thing got, because there was definitely interest, and as far as I'm aware, there was an approach of some kind. But was that they didn't want to necessarily pay for his rights to FC Dallas? What was it? They didn't want to pay him what he wanted, and if they didn't, then does that mean maybe FC Dallas also isn't going to want to pay what he wants? If he's valuing himself at how he performed early in the season rather than kind of later in the season and then going on to another year.
Yeah, you never know with these deals. Sometimes in the past, Dallas would promise a guy, hey, if you come in and play great and you're an MVP level player, we'll triple your money. And then the guy would have a great year. And then he'd go, where's my money? And they'd be like, oh, no, we meant like literally the MVP of the league. So like, for all we know, Illarramendi had this idea of like, if I come in and play great, you're going to give me $1.5 million. And they're like, well, you played well, but not great. And so here's $500K,
As well, at that age, you get kind of like the Matt Hedges thing, where it's like, you can have a year deal. No, I want 2 or 3 guaranteed. Yeah, we're going to go with a year.
Yep.
Wow. Well, it is absolutely going to be a different look burn in 2025, no matter how this all plays out. It'll be some extreme one way or the other. I can't quite figure out where it's going to go. I am curious if either one of you have spent any time thinking about the reality that when the season starts in 2025, out of that entire second generation of homegrown players that were on this team at one time, the only one remaining is Paxton Pomykal.
Well, he's the only one that wanted to stay. And think about the boatload of money they made with all those guys, selling all those guys too.
What does that mean, though?
About wanting to stay?
Yeah, John Arnold tweeted something yesterday about the idea of what does it mean when players, these kind of like star level homegrown players, plateau at Dallas and move on.
Well, sometimes it's related to the fact that Dallas has historically struggled to win in this league and win trophies. But to be fair, I just think that anytime you have young athletes who have come through one particular team since they were kids, that after a while they're just like, I wonder what the rest of the world is like.
It's get out of mom and dad's house theory.
Yeah, I mean, like every one of those guys that said it's time to move on, they're like, I bet if we went back, 90% of them had like some sort of, like I need to change off the field. Like Edwin Casillas, for example, was turning down Dallas's offers. He didn't think they were offering him enough money. So they were like, well, he's about to be out of contract. We better get him. What can we get for him? Kellen Acosta had quite notably some off-field stuff that it made him say, you know what? I've lost. There was a famous meeting, right? He went to Pappy and he said, I've lost the love of this game. I need to go try and find it somewhere else. I just need something new. And Jesus is the same thing. 9, he's been here since he was 9, man. playing in his dad's shadow. I get it.
Yeah, there was an aspect to John's tweet, though, that got me thinking, because I guess there's an implication. I don't know if he meant it this way or not, that players that left Dallas became better players when they went to other clubs. And it got me wondering, is that actually true? Was Kellen a better player? Was Edwin Cerrillo a better player? Was, insert name here, a better player at another MLS team? Or did those players just end up going to better teams?
Well, Kellen's was not better. His peak was at Dallas, in my opinion. Edwin has gotten better, but he was obviously quite young still. So he's still progressing towards the peak of his career. So it's not surprising that Edwin has gotten better. And a lot of those other guys that wanted to go were sold to big teams or have flamed out. Everyone's path is different. So I don't think there's a developmental hangup at FC Dallas. We've seen kids come through here and become really great players. I mean, look at Jesus and Paxton. Injuries aside, Jesus became an 18-goal goal scorer in a single season and tied the club record. Paxton got to where he was getting into the national team before his injuries caught up with him and really have derailed his whole thing. And he was like 20 years old when that happened. So
Cervania is the other one.
Cervania,
Reggie Cannon.
Reggie probably has gotten better, but again, he left at a time when he still had multiple years till his peak. Cervania has been so injury hurt in Toronto, they just cut him and he's with nobody, because he keeps getting hurt. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that there's a struggle. And I don't think Cervania is a guy who was like, I need to get out of here. Nico Evans didn't like him and just traded him. So I didn't like him as relatives. It's not like he hated the kid, but it's just like, hey, he's not the player for me. I'm gonna trade him. That happens.
It's always hard. And this is kind of like part of the infancy of the academy for FC Dallas and really for Major League Soccer. How a player does, they leave early. They're still developing physically, emotionally, mentally. Their peak is a long way off. You could look at, would Frank Lampard be the player he got to if he stayed at West Ham? Would Jack Wilshere have had the career that he should have had and not had all the injuries if he stayed at Luton instead of going to Arsenal? You can kind of do that until you're blue in the face. And with Dallas, like Philadelphia, like Real Salt Lake, like New York Red Bulls, there are a lot of players that you can do that particular exercise with.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, if you were to go down to, you pick any team in the academy and go to every kid in that team and say, hey, are you going to play for FC Dallas for your whole life? Every single kid, all 30, would say, oh no, I'm going to go play for Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. Right? There's not a single. Paxton's the only player I've ever heard of. And even he said, like, I'd be happy to play my whole life here, but I'd love to go to Europe too.
Yeah, Paxton's dream was to play for Arsenal, but he always said, I want to be MVP first.
Of the team or the league?
I think he said the league, but it might have been the same.
He's the most FCD kid ever, and he's just barely all FCD.
Oh, do you remember on Tanner Tessman's podcast with Johan Gomez and the other guys escape me now. But they kind of talked about that, how you're all in playing for FC Dallas, but realistically, you understand, like, you have a career that you're trying to make, and FC Dallas isn't the top of that particular pyramid necessarily.
That is an interesting perspective, because I think that probably isn't how most fans perceive the players. They think they're all dedicated to the club in the same way the fans are, but this is their career. And while you may, if you think about it, realize that, they have bigger ambitions and aspirations than playing in Frisco, Texas their entire lives, it is a weird feeling. I mean, I was talking about this on the radio show last week, which is, I think, depending on where you are as a fan of this sport, whether you're relatively new or you've been watching it a long time, this has been an interesting experience of growing up as a fan with a club who is birthing and growing and nurturing an academy, and all of the side drama and emotions and stuff that come with that. And this whole Jesus Ferreira thing is a great example. It's funny to me, and Dan, you may laugh at me when I say this, but there are a lot of really interesting parallels running right now between Jesus Ferreira and FC Dallas and Marcus Rashford and Manchester United. They're like really eerily similar parallels, obviously on very vastly different ends of the spectrum in terms of the sport, but they're both homegrowns. They're kind of big stars that clearly just wanted to get away from each other, but their salaries are so massive. It's really hard for both of those clubs to get rid of those guys. And there's a lot of emotions that run through that. And that's just been for me, that's been an interesting experience of kind of watching and learning and having all those emotions and experiences as this thing has gone on for the last, I don't know, how long's the academy been around now? 15 years or so?
I mean, even positionally, they both have that same sort of struggle of where do you put them in the team and how do you, how well can you accommodate for them? Both of them are big name players, but they're not necessarily a paradigm shift for just about anyone that's going to be able to afford them.
Yeah. It's weird how similar their stories are. All right, so there's a lot there. We could talk and prattle on about all of this forever and ever. I think ultimately we're not going to have any idea how this thing plays out until we actually see what the roster looks like. And even then you can say, well, they may end up having to go do some stuff in the summer, and we hate those, but that may be part of the reality of this. And at the end of the day, I'm still convinced that the stadium situation plays some part in this. The amount of that, or the percentage of that, I think is up for debate.
Yeah, we'll see whether that's true or not. If they sell, a Velasco or a Musa, and then how they respond after that, that will tell us a lot about that kind of direction.
Well, what I think is interesting about those two things is I can see a scenario in which they say, look, we didn't know these guys were going to go, so we don't really have a plan to replace them, so it's going to take us a while to do it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, of course it will.
Because if they sell Elton Velasco today, do they have a plan to spend that money to replace him? Do you think they have a plan in place?
Well, they should have, but they probably don't.
Right.
It may not have occurred to them that there was a chance that this money was actually going to come in, because we've been hearing this Velasco rumor for like 3 years now since he got here. But that's the thing, is like, because of that, you should have had a plan in place for, and to be fair, I think they probably have some level of plan, because we see these players that are similar profiles that occasionally get linked, or they have these, like the agent says there was interest from FC Dallas. They very well may be putting out feelers for like what happens if Alan Velasco gets sold. Like, we're not in those rooms, so it's impossible to know, but like there should be a plan in place for all the time for any player that you lose in your whole team. Well, maybe not scrubs, but you go back to like what happened when they lost Paxton, or what happens when they lose Giovanni Jesus. Like, you should have a plan. You shouldn't have to panic and be like, and make some rash decisions. Maybe that plan is Liam Frazier, but that's a plan. Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, I recognize that let me say this. I am glad that there are curious on your Discord, and there are fans like Sad FCD fan who are optimistic that the Hunts have ambition and are going to restock this roster well. I, on the other hand, in the jaded old turd who thinks at this point, all I see are 6 kids, the guy that's known more for his goofy hair than he is defending, the Sox guy, and some random 30-year-old midfielder that I have never heard of before in my life. And that's, you know what I'm saying? That's kind of where we're at this point. Nothing about what's happened so far is exciting to me in terms of what this team's going to look like for 2025. And I feel like I hold my reservation in place to say, let me see how this plays out for the next few, by the time the season starts.
Yeah, the one that made me raise my eyebrows was to go to the 2 DPs for U22 initiatives, because you get this extra pile of GAM, and they were trumpeting through various digitals and whatever that like, oh look, there's this $202 million in GAM. You can do these great things with it. Well, you've given up a DP spot. So I'm not entirely sure what you do with that GAM.
And you've also pointed out that their track record of signing U22s isn't
awful.
It actually sucks.
It's actually terrible.
What's the list?
It's Schbolks, Shun, Giovanni Jesus, Quinones, whose name's first name I can't remember, and Asali, and Giovanni Jesus. Those 5.
You said Giovanni Jesus twice.
Oh, did I? Oh gosh, I'm
so good he named him twice.
I'm doing it from memory. Shun, Quinones, Giovanni, Solly. Shit, there's one more.
He's so good you can't remember his name. That's such a great signing, such a critically awesome signing.
But the point is, like, the reason the U22 mechanic is set up the way it is because you can buy a player for $1 million or something if he's really young, and it won't count against the cap. So like that's the thing about that slot, is that you don't need the GAM. And if you're getting GAM from these other deals or whatever, and you're getting GAM because you missed the playoffs, and you're getting GAM because of an expansion year, it's like, I don't know what that extra 2 million GAM this year from dumping the DP spot gets you. I'm just not, it feels a little bit like celebrating something that, like, how am I going to actually use that? It makes me think that perhaps you're going, Jose Mulatto, that's the one we missed. Oh my God, he's the worst one. The one I can remember saying.
Fair. They paid money for an Asali.
Fair. The odds are higher that Asali will never play for this team than he will actually play for this team. The point of that is that, like, they're going to have a whole bunch of GAM and TAM and stuff, and the only thing they may be able to do with it is trade for some stuff. But I will say that, like, they actually have some roster positional holes they need to fill before they even sell anybody else, before you move Paul, before you move Allen, whatever, even not counting all that stuff, they actually have some positional holes they have to fill. So, but we may see some trades or something.
Yeah, but I don't mean to come off as being defensive about our position, and I don't know if you, Buzz, and Dan and I are all exactly in the same spot. But it, like, for example, getting rid of 3 DPs and moving to the 2-4 deal, it triggers 2 reactions that I think align with things that we fear about how this club is run, which is, it feels like it's a money-saving move, because now you're not going out and having to spend a massive amount of transfer dollars on some big DP signing, right? And plus whatever salary that cost you. And 2, you get all this free money to go spend on players. Well, that's part 1. I shouldn't say 2. That's part 1 of the thing that we worry about. Part 2 is, now we got to worry about, does this team have the front office aptitude to go out and sign quality U22s?
Yeah, I think they're 1 for 5. I'll give them Giovanni Jesus as being a solid piece until he blew his ACL.
Yeah, but do you understand what I'm saying?
So
when people tell me I'm being a pessimist or a negative Nelly about this, that's the kind of thing that I point out and go, tell me where in this club's history I should look at this and go, oh, that's a really good sign. Things are going to get better.
Yeah, I would say the ones that make me think they actually could do this are Velasco and Musa, which you're about to sell, and you're going to have 1 less DP this year. Like, my assumption when you were going to get rid of Jesus and get rid of Paul and open up all this money was then you would now be able to bring in a DP at a position that would give you some immense value. Not that you were going to not have DPs. So or not have 3 DPs. So that's, DPs are everything in this league. Yeah. Their ability, you can crush a U22. There are some amazing U22 signings in this league. They ain't here in FC Dallas.
Well, I think that's it, right? They're in a position now where they've previously used the U22 initiative to figure out those guys that probably aren't MLS level, or in Schön's case, but you can very quickly flip him and make 50% profit. Now they have to treat it like LA did in getting Joveljic. It has to be a hit. And the thing is, I think this plays into FC Dallas a little bit, because before U22, when they had 3 designated players, 2 were YDPs, 1 was a technicality. FC Dallas was always kind of like, the narrative was always, well, they don't use their DP slots. They just kind of have 2 that are technically there. Okay, that's great. They can be U22s now. You don't have to, waste a spot effectively.
Here's the thing, though. They of the 4 U22 spots, 3 of them are full. Leo Chu is one of them, and I imagine that was because there are some mechanics that involve what happens when you sell a U22. One of them is Giovanni Jesus, who I am starting to think maybe out for the whole year, because why go get Shaq Moore if he's not? And the third one is Enesali, who I think is entirely possible will not play a single minute next year.
So I forgot about Shaq Moore.
Yeah. So you're going to have one. Well, that deal happened before last podcast, so we didn't really talk
I know. I'm just.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that I give them credit for the moves that they've made, and that was one that I forgot.
I like that move. Good move. But
I don't
so
know.
that's 3 of your 4 spots that are. One might be sold. One is not going to play because he's hurt, and the other's not going to play because we don't think he's very good. So you have one more U22 spot instead of a DP spot to do something with post Jesus and Paul move. So,
and it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how those evolve, because we obviously spent a lot of time last year talking about using the buyout or using IR and freeing up roster spots, freeing up salary space. There is obviously a lot of chatter about Giovanni Jesus, so the buyout could be there, IR could be there. We don't necessarily know what Paxton's going to be like, and if that affects that. Enesali, I mean, honestly, I hope they just kind of figure out a way to get rid as soon as possible, because he's not productive to the roster, and now that spot there's more onus on it there's more importance to it, so you kind of can't have any dead weight, and he is a North Texas SC guy. He is not he doesn't have the luxury of being half of the 6 homegrown signed today that will just go back to North Texas SC on loan or go out to another club on loan. He kind of counts where he is.
Here's where I am on Solly. One of the homegrowns they signed today, his name is Daniel Barron. I think that he'll be the starting North Texas left wing next year and play most of the season with North Texas next year. If I had to pick between him and Solly on a game, I would pick Daniel Barron 10 games out of 10. And he won't play for FC Dallas probably next year. And then Solly will be with FC Dallas 100% of the time next year. And I wouldn't pick him once over that kid.
Yeah, there are a lot of parts to me that cannot figure out how Andre Zanata survived not having his head chopped off at the end of the 2024 season. And it starts with the Enesali signing. Like, that one to me remains a really weird mystery.
Yeah.
And I think we've all, along the way, Buzz, have heard really weird stories about that particular deal, and questions being asked about how that thing went down.
Someone suggested to me today, and I can't remember who it was, kind of half joking, that like if he was just Canadian, would they have bought him for the amount of money they did? And the answer would be no. Like, they bought him because he's Romanian. Oh, Stoichkov said he's good. Oh, that's cool. Let's buy that guy. Right. So, I mean, like, they're susceptible to the Euro lights too, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a kid that got cut from the Toronto SC Academy. So I don't know what we all expect.
Well, I guess this is Andre Zanata's big opportunity to prove all of us wrong, that he actually knows what he's doing. And this is it. And to be fair to him, we had a big giant fear that this was going to be a really quiet offseason, and it's been anything but. This has been the most active and interesting and worthy of discussion. I thought all these podcast episodes were going to suck rocks, but they've been, fun to do because we've actually got stuff to talk about. So
yeah, I mean, this is really a winter where you're going to theoretically see him, we hope, do the things that he's supposed to be good at. Can he flip Chew? Can he get these U22 guys? With this buying and this selling, this is why he's here. So, we'll find out. But we're still looking at a team that I said, like, there's 3 positional holes in this roster, just in very basic terms, before they even hit the forget about selling anybody. Just like for now, like fundamental basic roster building, there's 3 missing pieces.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other part of it is how good are they at scouting and evaluating talent to bring into the team, and I think that that's very much still up in the air.
Yeah, it is.
So we'll see. Preseason does kick off. All players have to report Saturday. That is.
It probably is all over everybody on Saturday. Usually the physicals historically take 2 days because there's a lot of players. So half it's Saturday, half Sunday. Whether they tell them they all have to show up on Saturday or not is whatever. I mean, this weekend they're all reporting, and then Monday will be the 13th is when camp officially opens.
Yeah.
Ah, shit.
What's that?
I normally go to training on MLK Day because I'm off work, and I confirmed it is absolutely going to be open this year after it wasn't the last couple of years. They leave for Portugal the day before.
Oh, sorry, Dan.
Well, here we go. The 2025 season is upon us. I did notice that they threw out a trailer today that MLS and the production company that did what is it? Need for Speed, Drive for Speed. What is the F1?
The Formula One thing.
Yeah. What
Drive to Survive?
Drive to Survive. Those people that Apple and MLS went out and hired to go do a documentary style series on the 2024 season came out, and there was not 1 millisecond of FC Dallas in it anywhere to be found.
I'm sure they'll be in there a tiny bit, but they're not a sexy team, nor were they any good, and they don't have a lot of personality. So I'm not.
That's probably a good thing as well, because the first season of Drive to Survive was good, and then it just turned to utter bollocks.
Yeah, if there's an analogy to be made, FC Dallas will be like the Williams team that they just never talk about, and it'll all be Daniel Ricciardi, Red Bull, Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton, and whatever that shrimpy little dude was that had the pencil mustache on one of the F1 teams. It'll be all those MLS teams. Dallas
it's going to be Beckham and Messi. Come on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. And I can't remember when they said they were going to start showing that on Apple.
I don't remember.
All right. Before we go, Buzz, you have said a couple of times that there are multiple holes in the roster, and I haven't given you the opportunity to kind of explain those. Why don't you do that before we move on?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I have this model for positional responsibility that I've used for a long time.
Sounds very haughty.
I know it's super nerdy, but I've used it for years and it always has worked. But the Zanata Hunt flexibility thing kind of throws it out the window a little bit. But pretty simply, they traded away Sam Jonka, left back, and they have not added a left back. So you have Marco Farfan and what? You're short a left back. Then at center back you have Ibiaga, Tafari, and Abubakar, and that's it.
Oh, that's right. They moved Sante, didn't they? They've loaned him out.
They loaned Sante. Yep. So you need a starter, challenger, or capable. I've been calling him CB1 because we want him to be a CB1. We want a Reto Ziegler, left-footed, intelligent veteran kind of guy, maybe, or prime for even better. But those are expensive. And then you need to replace Carl Sante. And for me, in this model, you always want 5 center backs. The 5th one is a young, usually. 2 years ago it was Matt Korcha. Last year it was Ahmet and or Carl, because Matt kept getting hurt. So so those are the 3 spots: left back, 2 center backs. So you're going into camp, and this was the winter of rebuild the defense. Remember, that's the whole thing. The defense needs all this work. Remember how excited Zanata was for Musa, Jesus, and Al Velasco all to be together and scoring, and how he wanted to see those guys feeding Musa, how great that was going to be. So really it was just the defense that needed work. Remember that?
Are any of the 6 homegrowns, or I know one of them's a goalkeeper, any of the 5 homegrowns that are left over defenders?
One of them is a right back, Malachi Molina, but he's a fair bit away from being ready for the first team. He's not even a starter at North Texas yet. He's one for the future. One of them is Diego Pappy, who's a 9. That's Eltrin's little brother. Anthony Ramirez is a 10 false wing. Daniel Barron's a left wing, and Diego Garcia is an 8.
Okay.
So no, none of them are defenders other than Molina, who's a right back. Doesn't help you at center back or left back. So I just wanted to point out that, in basic needs of what they talked about, which is restructuring the defense and improving the defense, there's still 3 holes. So forget about whether you're going to go sell Velasco or Musa. There still is work to be done as they enter camp. So those sales aside, they still have to do some things, and they have all this TAM and GAM now. So maybe you go out and try and trade for a piece somewhere, or maybe you go do some sort of non-big time star signing. They have, not including Illarramendi, they have 2 open international spots. So you could do Yara and 1 more if you wanted. So some flexibility, some roster positions are available to do some things. and you got 3 holes to fill. So good luck.
And then at Trinity FC, Dallas Trinity, are in that weird break, winter break. And this is also one of the weird side effects of playing this winter schedule, which is we're learning that the roster that we have come to know over the first half of the season is getting somewhat disassembled, and they're losing their best player in Sam Meza. And
Second best player.
Who's their best player?
Amanda Brooks, they're 6th, the veteran 6th, national team cap player.
Okay, fair enough. But Meza's going back because her loan's over, and there's a whole load of the younger players that are all moving on to go play in school, whether it be college or high school, for goodness sakes. And now they got to go back and reload the roster for the second half of the season.
Well, I knew that was coming.
Oh, I know. I just don't think. I wonder how many, just kind of your rank and file fan knows that that this is happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the season, they talked about Meza being through the end of 2024. I'd put some stuff out a couple months back about. Originally, it was only three academy players were moving on. It was going to be Jordan Hardiman, Kiara Gilmore, and Olivia Belcher. We're all going off to college. The Camden Fuller thing is a bit weird, going back to play high school before going to TCU, but Camden wasn't really getting a ton of time, so I don't know if maybe that the travel plus academy and everything else kind of factored in there, but it gives them a chance to bring in a couple more from Solar and FC Dallas potentially. So,
and I don't know if either one of you have caught wind of the buzz that this is no pun intended, the noise in the wind that they've got some sort of significant announcement of some sort of player acquisition for the second half of the season.
Yeah, there's some rumors out there. I'll be exciting to see who that is. That'll be fun. I mean, any kind of player that you could talk about coming to the Super League that's like an exciting player that's going to create no pun intended a buzz. That's fun because the NWSL clearly is the higher value, higher money league at this point. So it'll be really exciting to see somebody come in that'll be getting some notice. That's fun.
I was told that when I learned who the player is, it will, quote, blow my hair back.
Wow.
So there you
That's pretty huge.
All right. Well, there you go. That's what are we at, an hour, 20 minutes or almost an hour and a half.
Yeah. About an hour 20.
Plowing through all this noise. I'm trying to think if we've forgotten to talk about any part of it, and I can't.
Well, let me give you, while you're thinking about it, I'll give you a couple shout outs. Number one, Real Madrid's coming to the Dallas Cup again. Super cool. We're giving the super group.
So is Newcastle.
Newcastle we knew about already, but I'm super excited for Newcastle, of course, but Real Madrid. So that's a good get. And there are 3 kids in the FC Dallas Academy that have been so far named to U17 teams for the CONCACAF, what used to be the CONCACAF championships, but now is just called the CONCACAF qualifiers. So Josue Fuentes is a goalkeeper at U17, Ogier Vega, who's also a U17, and Diego Echeverria, who's a U16. So congrats to those 3 guys.
Very good. Well, I'm trying to think if I think that's about it.
That was a lot.
That was a lot. It's a weird going-ons in old FC Dallas land for sure.
I will say one more thing, that we think there's another loan coming, that a player will be loaned out from FC Dallas, like Carl Sante was loaned out. So we're waiting for that to happen too, which will affect obviously the roster build as well as you go into although, a player that would be loaned probably would fall into the category that where a homegrown could potentially replace them. So you wouldn't necessarily see a direct replacement like you need for Carl Sante, but still stay tuned for that to possibly happen.
Yeah. And just to kind of put a bow on it, I do think, over the last several seasons, I feel like we've used the theme of ambition, like taking a measure of the Hunt's ambition, and kind of said, we're going to get a real idea of just how ambitious they are as a ownership group. And your mileage may vary on where they went with that. Like I think when the 22 season started with the Velasco purchase and the Leggett and Arriola move, we thought, okay, wow, they're really showing ambition, and it seems to have wandered since then. And so I think
Musa.
And then Musa, the Musa thing, the Musa one was always a weird one to me because it just kind of came out of the blue. And it was weird that they spent all that money for Petar Musa, but then didn't spend the money to support that purchase. You know what I mean?
Well, don't forget too, there's a Benfica involvement in the Petar Musa, so that there could be layers to that whole scenario that we're not aware of.
So as we move into the 25 season, I think it's fair to go back and say this is another measuring stick of trying to figure out where the Hunt's level of ambition is, and we'll just kind of keep an eye on it. I mean, obviously it's good that they're making moves. I feel like it's okay to be guarded or suspect as to how it's all going to play out as we move towards the start of the season.
Yeah, we're 6 weeks basically from the start of the season. And Dallas has definitely had postures lately of, we may not by midseason, we may have something different than we have at the beginning of the year.
Right.
But they definitely have publicly stated that they want to try and get back to their DNA of their history, which I think is more about these players that they've traded for and spent a bunch of money inside the league, these veteran fringe national teams, your Pauls, your Leggett, who admittedly was their best player back in the last season. More for these guys coming through these U22 initiatives now, these homegrowns now. So we'll see if they can balance. Remember, that's always the thing, right? It's great to want 11 homegrown starters, but also, can you win with that? What's the balance? Where's the ambition at the top of the roster? So stay tuned.
Well, I think and this is something we can, everybody can ponder on for the next week, and we can really start to get into in next week's episode, which is just look at where the roster sits today. Assume that Velasco and Musa are staying and they're not selling them. Ask yourself this question: is this roster better, equal to, or worse than the roster at the end of last season?
And we'll save our answers till.
Well, I think, to be fair, it's too early to really answer that question because there's so many holes to be filled. But you can begin to start to think, you can kind of see where they're at this point, take a measurement of what's left to be filled in and start making, okay, now these other additions are really critical, or this isn't going to be a better roster than last year. It may be a younger roster, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a more competitive roster.
Fair.
So everybody ponder on that. Dan, it's great to have you back. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good holiday season and good health and all that stuff, my friend.
Good to be back and all healthy and all that fun stuff.
Let's go, Hatters. Come on, let's pick it up.
Yeah, but at least we've got a new stadium coming and that's all paid for, and we got a bunch of free transfers to look forward to.
And Watford got battered today.
I always enjoy that, yeah.
I know you did. Thanks for coming back, Dan. Excuse me. And Buzz, I know you're a busy man. I know this is like your favorite time of year. You're like a kid in Christmas.
I wrote more FC Dallas articles today than I've ever written in a single day before. It's incredible.
And your fingers. Boy, are your arms tired?
Yeah, boy. Woo. I was like, the little cat gif where the cat's going on the keyboard? That was literally me today.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you. And you kids out there, you curious out there, you stick in there and enjoy this time. This is the good times to be a fan and enjoy all the discourse and discussion and speculation and drama. This is when it's the good fun. So we appreciate you. And so thank you, FC Dallas Curious fans. We will speak to you next week on a fun-filled episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
It's never a dull moment.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.